Hello and welcome everybody to dashboarding using linked pivot tables. Alright, let's have a look at what we're going to cover today. So firstly, we're going to give you a brief overview into dashboarding design rules. What you want to do when you're setting up your dashboard. The thing is to look for the things to repeat over and over again. We'll have a look at the data set that sits behind our model. We'll play with it a little bit. We'll create a name for our table, and then we'll go about creating some pivot tables. We'll get these pivot tables to talk to one another, so we'll create a series of pivot tables, and then we'll get them to create summaries that actually hum and move and change in line with one another. So our dashboard changes as well, and it's really quite a cool technique. Alright, so let me take you through some of the things that you want to do when you're creating your dashboards. First, I've come up with a bit of an example, and I'll just talk you through some of the things that were going on here. I tend to put most of the important financial information on the most important information in the top left corner. In Google, there's something called the golden triangle, and then it's like where people look. They know where people look, because there's a little heat map of where the mouse goes. You can see my eye is going where my mouse goes, and the golden triangle makes up an area like this. So people's mouses tend to go in triangles in this sort of an area. So up and across. And with that knowledge, what I tend to do is to put the most important information just up here, the top left of the screen. It's the first thing the eye reads in the rest of the world. We don't start over here like in the Eastern world. We start here and we absorb that information. And then I move across and I put the next most important thing here and the next most important thing here. And that forms the golden triangle. But that's just a technique that I've been using. It kind of works for me, and it's up to you. Now, one of the other things you might notice about this dashboard is the color scheme. It's in a shade of red and green. There are really only two colors inside of the dashboard, so you don't have to go wild when you're creating your dashboard. What I tend to do is just pick a color scheme and stick with it. Just pick a color for your most important metric and a color for your second most important metric, and just replicate that over and over again. Another design rule that I do inside of a dashboard is I create a sort of symmetry. I try to line up a lot of the elements inside of the model. You can see that I've separated sort of 4 segments. There are some infographic elements in here as well. This is symmetrical so that the eye moves from the table element to the charting element to the charting element. And I've tried to line all this information up. If you cast your eye down here, there's really like a box of information. First box, second box is here, third box in here. When you do this, you have like unbroken segments inside of your dashboard. The eye just quickly moves from element to element, absorbs the information, and moves on. And it's very clean, it's not confusing. It has a very clean look and feel about it because I've only used a couple of colors, and in doing that, it just keeps things nice and simple. The other thing that we want to get into is creating flexibility at the back end of our dashboard. Usually we use some sort of combo boxes or drop-down list or option buttons, and you give your dashboard flexibility. And that's the key. Let's get back to our dashboard that we are going to create. Let's have a look at the Excel spreadsheet that sits behind this model. Let's go through our data set. Okay? Click on the data worksheet. What we've got here is we've got some sales data for a company that sells consumables, basically, and we've got our customer information on the left. And we've also got our salesperson information where the items were sold and where they needed to be shipped to. It moves on to describe the payment type. Is it by debit, credit, or cash? And then we've got our product name, which doesn't go into a great level of detail, but it does chunk up to a category. So beer, for example, goes in the beverages category. Dried plums go in the dried fruits, nuts, chocolate goes into the candy, etc., etc. You get the idea. Onto our quantitative information, we've got our unit cost, the cost to us, the unit price, the price we sold it to and to our customers, and what's the quantity. Also the revenue, which is just the unit price times the quantity. We've got a shipping fee that we then pass on to our customers, and there's a commission that we pay on our salespeople. This has 11 months worth of data, and it's in tabular form stacked on top of one another. So that means all of the months, January sits on top of February, which sits on top of March, and all the way down to November. And all of the information is the same size and shape. So we're just basically bringing the new monthly information in and dropping it to the bottom of our table. And that's what the December tab is. That's a tab that we're going to use to update the pivot table so that we can bring in fresh data. We'll show you how easy it is to update the information. Now, the following sheet is going to be our dashboard, so I've created 3 distinct tables. What we're going to do is we're going to bring in some data tables, and we're going to make some charts, and we're going to make them fit within the parameters of these tables, which I've got here. And hopefully it'll look quite good and will be quite functional when we're done. Firstly, what we'll do is we'll go on to our data tab. And I'll put my cursor anywhere inside of the tab, and I'll just press Ctrl+T. Now this is an Excel shortcut for creating a table, so I'm just going to turn my dataset into a table. A good thing about pressing Ctrl+T is Excel recognizes the tabular nature of the dataset, and it says, right, we think that your information is between A1 and S313, and this table has headers. If I agree, I'll just click OK. And it should convert my dataset into a table. I can change the look and feel of it if I want, but I'm pretty comfortable with the color blue and the dark blue color heading that they gave me, so I'll just stick with that. Alright, one of the other things that you can do when in the table created is it gives the table a name. If you go to the Table Design tab, Table 1 is what the table is called. Now that doesn't mean a great deal. What I might do is I might change the name of the table to Sales and press Enter. Now our table and anything that we refer to will refer to the table called Sales, which is handy if you're creating a report with multiple tables inside a spreadsheet. Okay, let's turn this table into our first pivot table. So we'll just go on, click on the Insert button, and just choose Pivot Table. And you'll see that the table range refers to sales. I want to put it in a new worksheet, so I just want to click OK. Alright, it's created my pivot table without any information in it. Over here to the right, we've got our pivot table field list. What we're going to do is we're going to create some pretty cool groupings in our pivot table so we can report monthly information, because, if you might remember, this was sort of transactional data, so it's at a daily level. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to choose our date. So here is the order date, which is the second column, so we'll choose that. And let's drop it into rows area. Cool. Notice that the Excel automatically grouped our dates into days and months. I'm going to uncheck the days field for now, and we're going to leave the months order date field. So I have only grouped the dates into months for January to November. Again, from my pivot table list, I'm just going to choose revenue and drop it into the values field. Okay, let's rename this worksheet. We will call this sheet our monthly, and I'll move this sheet right in between my December sheet and my dashboard sheet. Now a big fat disclaimer here. If you have an older version of Excel and it didn't group the dates automatically into months, here are the steps to do it manually. So the first thing that we are going to do is we're going to right click on the date, and then we're going to choose Group. Now, Excel has given me a number of options. It had a look at the dataset and it says, okay, we believe that it started on the 1st of January 2023 and we believe it has gone to the end of November in 2023. Okay, so what we'll do is we can choose whether we want it to show it in days, months, which it is already in, quarters, or years. Now, there's only 11 months worth of information, but months are what we're after. So we'll click OK. And what it does is just chunk the information up month by month. So it groups all of the daily information into monthly information. And now we've got a data set that we can use because it's at a summary level. So I'll just clean up the formatting first. I'll highlight this area from B4 to B15. And we'll just use the shortcuts just up here, the comma style. Let's remove the decimals. Alright, so now that's created, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a chart on the back of this information, which just summarizes the information by month. If I click on the Insert menu, what I want to choose is, I want to choose the line chart, which is just here. And I want them to have markers on them. So I'll choose a line chart with markers. Excel instantly creates my chart. Alright, cool. Now, one of the things that I've always felt about the charts that Microsoft creates is that they're always a little bit busy. Even in the later versions of Excel, they're getting better at creating charts, but you can still clean them up and make them less fussy. So that's the first thing I usually do. The first step is to click on the total series information, and I just click delete to get rid of it. The lines that are the horizontal marker lines, we can remove those as well. So you click on them and choose to delete. The numbers on our vertical axis are not required either. We'll click delete. The final thing I want to do is to clean this up, and that is to right-click on the Fields button and just hide the All Fields button on the chart. Now it looks like a regular Excel chart. Okay, I'm going to change the name of the chart and I'm going to call this Chart Sales by Month. Alright, I might just change the font size to about 12 points so that it takes up less real estate. Move it to the top. To give it a bit of pizzazz, what I'll do is those markers, I'll just click on the markers, right click, and I want to format the data series. I right click just about for everything. Right click is a great way to change the structure of any chart. So you just click on the element, right click on the element that you want to change, and then choose what you want to do from the field list that pops up. Now I've got this format data series part on the right, and the first thing I'll do is I'll click onto this fill and line icon, and the marker area pops up. Let's click into that. What I want to do is, I want there to be no border. That's the color that goes around the marker, and I click in the fill options. And I want to choose a color scheme for my dashboard. Now I do want to use blue for the line, but for the marker I might just choose this dark red. Now it's a fairly flat looking scheme at the moment, and what I want to do is, I'd like the marker to pop out a little bit. So the way that we do that is to just choose this effect. I don't like to go too wild here, and I just choose the 3D effect at the top and the top bevel. Just choose this first round bevel. Very cool. And I might just change the size of the marker while I'm at it. So I'll go back here, and for my marker, I want to change the marker options, and I choose built-in. And I'll just change my size from 5 to 8. Which just makes it a little bit bigger. Alright, that looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. Finally, I will remove the grid lines of the sheet from the View tab. And close the Format Data Series pane. Alright, we have our monthly worksheet ready to use. So, we're just going to use this particular sheet as a bit of a template. What we'll do is we'll make a copy of the sheet. If you just hold the control key and click on the sheet, you'll notice that there's a little plus sign that appears. I'm taking my finger on and off the control key, and when the plus sign is there, you can actually drop it where you want it. So I'll drop it next to my monthly sheet, and it's called Monthly 2. I'm going to create a distribution. I'm going to call this sheet distribution. Now I've got a pivot table which is linked to my source, and what I effectively want to do is just want to move and change this pivot table. So I've got a distribution for my sales. For example, how many sales happen between $0 and $1,000? How many sales happen between $1,000 and $2,000? 3 to 4, and then greater than 4,000. So basically, it's a distribution, and pivot tables do that very, very well. The way that we do that is I'll just right-click on my pivot table and I'll choose Show Field List. I don't have to do it in my worksheet because I have the pivot table fields right there. Now, I want to go down here to the order date. Take that out. And I want to move my values across into the rows area. So I have all of my revenue appearing in one column. Alright, let's right click into my pivot table, and once again I will set up another group. And Excel will know all these aren't dates, and it says, right, okay. We think you want it to group in this manner. And I said, no, I don't. I want to start at 0, and I want to end it, let's say at $5,000. And I want the distribution to be thousands between each category. So 1,000, 2,000, and 3,000 all the way up to 5,000. And then it'll stop at 5,000. Anything greater than 5,000 will just be grouped into the category above 5,000. So we click OK. I might need to put my revenue as well into the table. Let's drag the revenue field and drop it right into the values area. Alright, so it's instantly said, okay, we think you want to see a count of the revenues. And I'll go, yeah, okay, that's fine. So it's put the field that I want inside of my pivot table, which is great. I am probably more inclined to go above 4,000, so we can change that. There's only 10 in that bucket, so maybe I'll make that bucket a little bit smaller. So I'll right-click on the table and I'll say Group. And I'll change that 5,000 to 4,000, and I'll go OK. Yep, there we go, and that's a little bit better. I don't want to keep this particular chart. I want to make a different chart. So I right-click on my chart and I click the Change Chart Type option. At this time, I want to make a bar chart. Let's click OK. Alright, it's got my distribution there. Let's change the chart title to the count of transactions. And let's add some data labels. What I think I might like to do here is make the size of the series a little bit greater. Okay, so let's right-click on the series and just say Format Data Series. What I'm interested in is the gap width. It says 150. I want to make it just 50. I'll click outside the table and then it changes the gap width. You see, the gap width is now smaller and the chart takes up a lot more real estate within the chart like the series does. Okay, I'm reasonably happy with that. It's got all the information that I want. I can make a copy of this chart and we'll move on to our next one. So let's make a copy of that chart. Now we're going to be creating a chart by category. So I'll call this one category. Let's change our table here. From the pivot table fields, I'll take my revenue out. And what I'm going to replace that with is my category. So I'll click on category, and that's instantly gone into the row labels. I don't want the count of my revenue. I want a sum. So I'll click on the count of revenue, and I'll go value field settings. And I just changed that to a sum. Click OK. Alright, cool. Let's sort these revenues into a descending order. Let's click inside my sum range. From the Home tab, Sort and Filter button, I'll just choose the largest to smallest. The next step is I would like to show just my top 5 revenue. The way that I can do that is to click on the drop down from the row labels and I choose Value Filters. See, this one at the bottom, it says Top 10. So I click on that and I just simply change the top 10 to a 5 and then I click OK. These labels are taking up a reasonable amount of real estate. Right-click on the labels and I go to Format Data Labels. And I'll change that to Center. And I might change the number format. So I just click on number 3. What I'll do is I'll just create my own format. Click inside the format code box, delete general, and let's type. Hashtag, comma, hashtag, 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 comma, space. And then I'm just going to put K for thousands inside of double quotes. So that should clean that up. I'll click Add. Alright, cool. That's done what I want, but you can't see it very well. So I'm just going to change the font up here. Let's change the font to white, and that looks a lot better. It's time to change the title of the chart. This is our top 5 by revenue category, so we'll change that to top 5 by category. Top 5 by category. Okay. That's pretty much this pivot table and its assorted chart done. Now what I'm going to do is we're going to summarize the information by month, but we're not going to show the total of our revenue. We're going to show our revenue as a percentage. Once again, make a copy of this particular sheet. Hold the Control key and just drop it next door. And we will call this sheet State. Let's click on our pivot table. I'll just get rid of this format shape. Let's take category out from the pivot table fields, and we will move our state in. The top 5 category has gone, and instead of the sum of the states, what we'll do is we'll change this to a percentage. On the values area, click on the sum of revenue, and then the value field settings. And on this show values as area, I can click on there. And from this drop down, I can choose percentage of grand total. And it will change the numbers that we have in our pivot table to percentages. So I'll click OK. Alright, I'll remove our labels because that's not working. Delete. Cool. That's alright. And I'll highlight this area once again, the sum of revenue percentages. You probably don't need to highlight it, and from Sort and Filter menu, I'm going to sort this from largest to smallest. And I'm going to change the chart this time. Right-click on my chart, and I'll say Change Chart Type. This time I want to create a column chart, and I want to click OK. And we'll need some labels. So right-click on our chart and we'll go to Add Data Labels. You'll notice I'm right-clicking to do just about anything. It's a great way to get information into a chart reasonably quickly. I will change the title of the chart and I will call it Revenue by State. Our worksheet is ready. Excellent. Alright, so for the following chart, what we might do is we might make a copy of this monthly chart. So let's create a copy of that monthly chart, and we're going to call this one of our payments. What we want to do here is we want to trap the information that relates to the payment type. Has it been made by debit card? Has it been made by credit card? Or has it been made by cash? So we can get an idea of how the revenue is coming into our business. Let's click on my data set. And the pivot table field comes up. Otherwise, you can just right-click and click to show the field list. Or hide the field list, because mine's showing it's there. The first thing I'm going to do is take out my order date. And I'm going to replace this with my information that relates to our payment type. So I'll just click on payment type. And that's come through in the table. We might sort this out as well. Let's highlight the information and select the smallest to largest. Mine's already sorted from smallest to largest. Yep, that's the kind of look I want to go for, which is good. That's pretty much all I want to show for that particular part or this particular chart. And that's all of the charts that we're going to be creating in order to generate our table. What we'll do next is we'll create the data tables that are going to sit inside of our dashboard. So we'll make a copy of this payment sheet, hold the Control key, and just drop it down. And the first one that we're going to do is going to relate to our salesperson. So I'll just call this salesperson. We won't need a chart, so I can remove it by clicking on the chart and just choosing to delete. I really have to recreate this pivot table to a certain extent, so I'll take out my payment type. And because it's a salesperson, I'll just choose salesperson. Also, I'm going to want to bring my quantity in, so I can click on quantity, and I want to move my quantity to bring in front of my sales. So it should say sum of quantity and then sum of revenue. And I'm going to create a brand new revenue category. I'll just drag the revenue field and drop it at the bottom. I don't want to count the revenue. I want the sum of the revenue. So I'll click on the revenue and choose Value Field Settings. And I want to sum, and I want to show value as a percentage of grand total. And we'll click OK. All right. What it's saying is Adam Miles had 179 units of sales. The revenue was 5.8K, and that makes up 1.6% of the overall revenue for the 11 months to date. Okay? So this is going to be a bit of a template for us. What I want to do now is I just want to sort this by revenue, from largest to smallest. Excellent. That all looks good. I've got all of the information that I want in the form that I wanted. This is going to be the template for our other two tables. We're going to make this table, which is for the salesperson. We're going to make one for product, and we're going to come up with another one for our customers. Let's create another one, a copy of this. Let's call this one product. Now let's click inside of our pivot table and the pivot table field. And what I want to do is I want to take the salesperson out. And I want to replace it with our product. I'll just choose our product name, and this will need to be sorted out as well. So I'll click inside of my pivot table and I'll sort it from largest to smallest. I said I was going to choose the top 10 here. I will click inside this row label, choose the value filters, choose top 10, and all we need to do is click OK. So it's got my top 10 inside of this particular table for our products. Now I just want to create our customer table. So I'll make a copy of this particular sheet and call this sheet customer. And I will just take out our product name and bring in our customer's name. And that's got all of our customers. That is effectively our 3 data tables. I'll just create one for a different color for these ones. Let's just choose light green. And these ones with the chart on them from monthly to payment, I will choose a light blue. What I want to do from here is I want to incorporate the information that we've got all in our sheets and bring it into our dashboard. Okay, so we'll go into our dashboard sheet. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to populate our data tables: salesperson, product, and customer. Let's put your cursor into B6. And what we're going to do is we're going to get into the salesperson information. So we'll say equals, we'll click the salesperson worksheet, and we'll choose cell A4. Press enter. Here is Jerry Spring in cell B6. Let's copy that cell with Control C. Hold down the Shift key and then click into cell E13. Leave the Shift key and press Control Alt V, all at the same time. That brings up your shortcut to Paste Special dialog box. Of course, you could right-click and just choose Paste Special, but I like shortcuts whenever I can. Now, choose Formulas and click OK. That's brought in our quantity, our revenue, and our percentage of revenue for our salespeople. Okay? What we might do now is we might create an in-cell chart for this particular table. Now, the way that we're going to do it is we're going to use the repeat function. It's just a formula that repeats a number of characters. I'll give you a quick example. Click into cell F6 and type equals REPT for repeat, open bracket. I will just put A in quotation marks and then comma. And how many times do I want to repeat it? Let's just say we'll repeat it 5 times, close that bracket. And so, what you get is A written 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. Now, with our data set, what I want to do is I want to turn the revenue values into basically a percentage. And I want to turn this range of cells into a little chart, this area here. And I'm going to use the repeat function to do that. Let's start with the chart revenue. Cursor inside F6 cell, delete that, type equal REPT, open parentheses. What we're going to do is we're going to repeat the pipe symbol. So if we put our quotation marks open, the pipe symbol is just that little straight line beside the enter key. It's above the backslash. So I hold the Shift key and I press the pipe symbol, and then I close the quotation mark. It's just a straight line. That's the first part of the equation. The second part is how many times do I want to repeat it? I want to click into D6 and I want to divide that by the maximum of this column. I want to divide it by the maximum of those cells. So D6 to D13, and I want to press F4 once. Then I want to close my bracket, and I'll close my bracket again. Enter. It looks like one pipe symbol. But what I want to do is I want to multiply that by 100. So I put my cursor just before the last bracket and say I multiplied it by 100, okay? It creates a reasonably long and not so great looking line chart. Let's see what that looks like when we copy it down. It doesn't look really good. Plus, I want it to fit inside those cells. Now, the way that we can do that is from the Home tab, and from Font drop-down menu, we choose the Playbill font. And what it does is it changes the format of that pipe symbol, so it's all tightly squeezed together. It's quite a thick font type. Now, what I'll do is I'll change the color in line with the color scheme that we're going to have for our dashboard. So I chose the second bottom blue one. Very good. That's given us our salesperson information. We've got our quantity, revenue, percentage of revenue, and we've got a neat little chart happening out to the right. I want to replicate this basically 3 times. Now we go to our product information, we put our cursor into B17 and we say equals. Click into your product sheet, and let's click into A4. Press enter. And let's do exactly the same thing that we did before. Control C, then highlight the range that we want it to fall into. And I'll just stop into row 26. Press Control, Alt, and V. The special paste opens. Select Formulas and click OK. That's done quite nicely. Now I'll just put my cursor in F6, press Ctrl C, and paste it into F17. If I double click, I can actually move this area down. You can actually see when the line around the revenue area at the top becomes highlighted. You notice the highlight there. I can grab it so I can click down on it and drag it down to the area below. And I'll just cover that down 2 more. Let's copy our formula down the chart lines. And we have it going from the highest to lowest. Alright, that covers off our product table. Now let's have a look at our customer table. We want to do roughly the same thing. So put your cursor into B30, type equals, go into the customer sheet and choose Customers A4. Same again, copy the information, highlight the range from B30 to E37, press Ctrl, Alt, and the letter V. Select Formulas. Alright, good stuff. The last thing we need to do is to just create our Excel chart. I will use the first cell again because it's going to do a much better fit in terms of size. So I've copied cell F6 and I'll paste it into F30. Double click once more and just drag that down so it covers the appropriate range. So I'll go to our customer chart and we'll put our cursor into the revenue column. And we'll just choose largest to smallest. Cool. Now we've got our 3 tables, and all we want to do now is we want to start to incorporate some of the charts that we created in this particular pivot table. We'll go first to the monthly chart. We'll copy this chart, so just Ctrl C. Ideally, we wouldn't want to leave these charts inside of the model. We'd probably delete them. But we can go back and do that later. Return to the dashboard and just put your cursor in one of those cells at the start and Ctrl V. Now what we have to do from here is we have to start to incorporate this chart into its charting box. Now I've made this chart sort of one of the main charts, so it's going to be elongated compared to some of the other ones. We just make it fit, okay? One of the things that I've noticed about this particular chart is that it doesn't have any information describing what the data points are worth. So we right-click on the series labels, and we'll just go to Add Data Labels. Now, we'll right-click on the labels and we'll say Format Data Labels. We want to show them, maybe we'll go above. I hope that works. And we want to format these in the same way that we formatted the other one. So I choose number. And inside the format code, let's just go with hashtag, comma, 3 hashtags, and then a comma, space, and then a K in quotation marks, and click Add. Yep, it's all looking reasonably good. I might just make this a little bit smaller. Alright, that's our first chart inside of our pivot table. That's inside of our dashboard. Now let's go to our distribution. Let's copy this chart, go into our dashboard sheet, paste it here. Now we're going to need to resize this so it's quite a bit smaller. So I'll resize it. And we need to leave enough room so that we can get some of the other information. I might just change the size of this count of transactions title. 11 point. Yeah, that's fine. Now I'll go into the category sheet. And we'll copy our top 5 by category. We'll paste that into the dashboard sheet, and this is where dashboarding gets a little fiddly. I've got to make these roughly the same size. If you want to double check that the two charts have the same size, you can highlight them one by one. And from your Format tab, you can check the height and width of each chart. Now the two charts are identical. Okay, let's go to my stage sheet. Copy this particular sheet, paste it into this particular area, resize it a bit. Go to my payment sheet, copy this particular chart, and then paste it into the particular area here. Check the height and width of these two charts. So now they're roughly the same size. They're not perfectly aligned with these particular charts, but what you can do is align all 3 charts to the left. So if I highlight this one, and then hold the Shift key, and then highlight my count of transactions, and then continue to hold the Shift key, and click on Revenue by State, from the Page Layout tab, I can choose to align left, and that aligns them perfectly. And now if I highlight the one at the top 5 by category, and the sales by month, I can choose Align and Align Right. you can align everything so it's all nicely spaced. Alright, that's given us a good sort of solid template. The last thing that I want to do is remove the border and fill of all the charts. I like to be transparent. Let's right click on the first chart and format the chart area and remove fill and border. I'll quickly do the same for the other charts. Alright, now what we want to do is we want to add the interactivity inside of this template. So I'm going to add a slicer. So if I click on this first particular pivot chart, we can add a slicer to just by using this. Let's click to the Analyze tab and choose Insert Slicer. And I want to summarize this whole particular dashboard by my state. So I'll click on State and click OK. Now it's created this particular slicer. I prefer this particular format to have 6-column slicer. So I'll change this columns from 1 to 6. Alright, it's created my 6 columns. Right click on the slicer and choose Slicer Settings. And now what I want to do here is take off the display header. And now I've got the capacity to move and change the particular slicer. So I'll move it to where I want it to be. Eventually I'll move it up here in alignment with my pivot table. Let's select a different slicer style. Okay, I'm happy with that. Now if I click on my slicer, my pivot table will change my sales by month. And it's highly interactive, but it's highly interactive for that single table. What I want to do from here is I want to create a function which will allow this entire pivot table to be linked to this particular slicer. So it's reasonably straightforward. What you do is right click on your slicer and you choose Report Connections. And then just go forth and make every pivot table link to that particular pivot table. Now in order to do that, you just need to have the same cache. And when I say same cache, same pivot table cache, is it all has to be linked to the same data source. And I ensured that by creating a sheet for each pivot tables by using the same pivot table source. So we click OK. And now if I hold the Control key, I can choose multiple items. I've chosen New South Wales, Queensland, Victoria, or I can sum up the whole of the company just by holding the Control key. And that's got all of the states. Everything is changed in align and with alignment of that. The pivot table now has an interactive tool to sum the parts of the company or the whole of the company. The final thing I wanted to show you is adding new information. Now, you remember I said that we've got a template. Our data is a bit of a template. And what I tend to do when I'm going to add new information is I go to the bottom of my data set. So I'll just go right to the bottom, Control, Shift, down arrow, and get into the last cell and just press Tab. And now go to my December data. Let's just grab the information that's related to our data set. Put my cursor into A2, control down arrow. Control right arrow. Control C to copy the data set. Choose data, and now go into the very last cell, and I'll just paste the values. Excel instantly recognizes what each of these columns' values is and applies it to the formatting. Now all I have to do is go back into my datasheet set. I click on any of the charts under the Analyze menu, and I choose this refresh button. And then I just choose Refresh All. And now we'll refresh all the pivot tables. You'll notice that the December data came in, all of the tables changed to incorporate the new information. And that's the process of updating this particular chart in roughly an hour or less than an hour. Because I gave a brief overview at the start, we've covered off basically everything. Oh, well. A reasonably quick summary of our sales position by a number of metrics, and it was all done reasonably straightforwardly, and you'd be able to do it a lot faster than I did because you just practiced, really, and you get better at it, and you can create these things in 15 to 20 minutes. And then you spend all of your time sort of designing the layout after that, which you use in your board reporting or whatever you're using the dashboard for. So whether you're starting out or looking to sharpen your Excel skills, this course is going to be your ticket to becoming an Excel pro. Check out the link in the description to start learning today. Thank you for watching till the end. Thank you for being here, and don't forget to like this video if you found some value in it. And do subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. And I'll catch you in the next video.